The Galactic Integration Academy floated in the dark space between three star systems. It was built into a massive station called Seven, and it was home to more than 12,000 students from 43 different alien species. The station was old, nearly 300 years by Earth counting, and its metal walls had seen generations of young beings pass through its halls. Some came to learn science. Some came to study diplomacy. Others came simply because their governments demanded it. The academy was meant to bring the galaxy together, to teach young minds that cooperation was better than war. Among all these thousands of students, there were only 17 humans. Humanity was new to the galactic community. They had only made first contact 8 years ago, and most alien species still looked at them with confusion or pity. Humans were small. They had no claws, no scales, no natural armor. They could not breathe underwater or survive in vacuum. They did not have telepathy or the ability to see in complete darkness. To the older species of the galaxy, humans seemed like soft little creatures who had somehow stumbled into space by accident. Price was one of those 17 humans. She was 16 years old and she had been on the station for almost 5 months. She was not tall. She was not loud. She had brown hair that she kept tied back in a simple ponytail, and she usually wore oversized hoodies that made her look even smaller than she already was. In class, she sat in the back. She took notes quietly. She answered questions only when the teacher called on her directly, and even then her voice was soft and calm. Most of the alien students did not even know her name. To them, she was just another human, barely worth noticing. This was exactly how wanted it. She had learned a long time ago that being underestimated was not a weakness, it was a gift. Her grandfather had taught her that. His name was William Price, and he had been a Marine for 30 years before he retired. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth, survived things that would break most people, and come home with medals he never talked about. When was young, he took care of her while her parents worked. He taught her how to hunt deer in the mountains of Montana. He taught her how to track animals through snow and how to stay calm when everything around her was falling apart. He taught her how to fight. By the time was 12, she had started training in Brazilian at a small gym in their town. By 14, she had won regional competitions. By 16, she could take down opponents twice her size without breaking a sweat, but she never bragged about it. She never showed off. Her grandfather always said the same thing to her. The world will underestimate you because you are small and quiet. Let them. That is your advantage. On Station 7 followed that advice perfectly. She studied hard. She kept her head down. She made a few friends, but not many. Her closest friend was a girl named, who belonged to a species called was thin and delicate with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that always seemed a little sad. They were a peaceful species, known for their art and music rather than their strength. Was shy and nervous, and she often got picked on by the larger students. Liked her because she was kind and genuine, and because she never pretended to be something she was not. Her other friend was a human boy named Danny. Danny was 17, skinny, and talked too much. He was always excited about something, whether it was a new discovery in his engineering class or a strange food he had tried in the cafeteria. He made laugh, even when she did not want to. The 3 of them often sat together at meals, a little island of quiet friendship in a sea of alien faces. Life on the station was not easy for humans. Many of the alien species looked down on them. They were the worst. They were a warrior species, tall and covered in dark green scales that acted like natural armor. Their hands ended in sharp claws and their teeth were made for tearing meat. They had been part of the galactic community for over 1,000 years, and they believed that made them superior to everyone else. To them, humans were insects, barely worth acknowledging. There was a group of students who had made it their personal mission to remind the humans of their place. Their leader was a student named. He was 7 feet tall, broad as a cargo loader, and mean in a way that seemed to come from deep inside him. He never missed a chance to bump into a human in the hallway or knock their books out of their hands. The teachers looked the other way. The security guards pretended not to see. On Station 7, students were given respect because everyone was afraid of them. Had seen bully other students many times. She had watched him corner a young boy and take his food. She had seen him trip a human girl in the corridor and laugh as she fell. Every time she felt her blood rise. Every time she wanted to step forward and do something, but she held back. She waited. She watched. She remembered what her grandfather taught her. Do not fight unless you have to, but when you have to, make it count. The days passed slowly on the station. Attended her classes, did her homework, and spent her free time in the library or the small gym reserved for humans. She practiced her techniques alone, shadowboxing against invisible opponents, keeping her body sharp even though she hoped she would never have to use it. Sometimes Danny would find her there and ask what she was doing. She would just smile and say she liked to stay active. At night she would lie in her small dormitory room and look out the window at the stars. She thought about her parents back on Earth. Her mother was a scientist who studied alien biology. Her father was a military commander who spent most of his time on a ship called the Endurance, patrolling the edges of human space. She missed them both, but she knew they were proud of her for being here. She was representing humanity, even if most of the aliens did not care. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that in just a few days, she would be forced to make a choice that would shake the entire station. She did not know that and his friends were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. All she knew was that tomorrow was another day, and she had a history exam to study for. So she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let sleep take her. The quiet human rested peacefully, unaware that her peace was about to end. The east corridor of the dormitory wing was usually quiet at this hour. Most students were either in class or eating dinner in the main hall. The lights hummed softly overhead, casting pale blue shadows on the metal walls. Walked alone, her bag slung over one shoulder, her mind still on the history exam she had just finished. She thought she had done well, but with alien history, you could never be sure. There were so many dates and names and wars that had happened before Earth even had electricity. She was about to turn toward her room when she heard it, a scream, high and sharp and full of fear. It cut through the quiet like a knife and stopped in her tracks. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew that voice. It belonged to. Did not think, she ran. She rounded the corner and found them in a small alcove where two corridors met. 3 students stood in a half circle, their massive bodies blocking the way out. In the center, pressed against the wall, was the girl had fallen to the ground, her thin arms wrapped around her head, her body shaking with sobs. One of them had his clawed hand raised, ready to strike again. There was already a mark on his arm where she had been hit. The leader of the group was. He stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene with a cold smile on his face. His dark eyes glittered with amusement. This was fun to him. Hurting someone weaker was entertainment. Felt something rise inside her. It was not just anger. It was something older and deeper, something her grandfather had put there through years of training and hard lessons. It was the knowledge that some things could not be ignored. Some moments demanded action. She stepped forward into the alcove. Her voice was calm and clear when she spoke. "Leave her alone." The 3 turned to look at her. For a moment there was silence, then began to laugh. It was a low, rumbling sound that echoed off the metal walls. The other 2 joined in, their deep voices filling the corridor. A human said, shaking his head. His voice dripped with contempt. "This does not concern you, little mammal. Walk away before you get hurt." Did not move. She looked past him who was staring up at her with wide, terrified eyes. The girl shook her head slightly, trying to tell to run to save herself, but had already made her choice. "I said leave her alone." Smile faded. His eyes narrowed and he took a step toward. He was nearly twice her height and his shadow fell over her like a dark cloud. Most beings would have run. Most beings would have begged for mercy. Simply shifted her weight slightly, settling into a stance that looked casual but was anything but. "You have courage," little human said. He sounded almost impressed. "But courage will not save you from pain. I'm going to teach you a lesson about knowing your place." He nodded to one of his companions, a named who was only slightly smaller than himself. Stepped forward, his claws extended, his mouth twisted into a cruel grin. He reached for her with one massive hand, expecting to grab her by the arm and throw her against the wall. He never touched her. Moved faster than any of them expected. She's reaching hand, dropped low and swept her leg against his ankle. The big was not ready for it. His balance broke and he stumbled forward. Used his own momentum against him, grabbing his arm and pulling hard. Flew past her and crashed into the second, sending them both tumbling to the floor in a heap of scales and confusion. Stared in disbelief. His 2 friends were on the ground, groaning and struggling to untangle themselves. This tiny human girl had done that. It did not make sense to him. It was not possible. His disbelief turned to rage. He swung with his right hand, his claws cutting through the air where her head had been a moment before. But she was already moving, ducking beneath the blow and stepping inside his reach. She was too close for him to use his claws now. He tried to grab her, but she was faster. Her palm shot upward and struck him hard in the throat, right below his jaw. Made a choking sound. His hands went to his neck and he staggered backward, gasping for air. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. He could not breathe. He could not speak. He fell to his knees, then collapsed onto his side, still clutching his throat. The whole fight had taken 8 seconds. Stood over them, breathing hard but steady. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from the rush of adrenaline that came after any fight. She looked at the 3 on the ground, then turned to. "Are you okay?" she asked, reaching down to help her friend up. Nodded, tears still streaming down her face. She clutched his arm like she was afraid to let go. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "How did you do that?" Did not have time to answer. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Looked up and saw station security approaching. There were 4 of them, dressed in dark armor and carrying shock batons. At their head was a figure she recognized from orientation. Commandant of the species. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and cold black eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. They were known throughout the galaxy for their rigid sense of order and their belief that strength determined worth. They were also known for disliking humans. Surveyed the scene with quick, calculating eyes. 3 students on the ground, a girl crying, a human standing over them all. He made his decision in an instant. "The human started this," he said. His voice was flat and certain. "Detain her." Tried to explain. She told him about the bullying, about being attacked, about how she had only acted in defense of her friend, but did not listen. He did not ask questions. He did not look at the security cameras that had recorded everything. He simply grabbed by the arm, his grip painfully tight, and began dragging her toward the detention block. Called out, trying to stop them, but one of the other guards held her back. Danny appeared from somewhere, shouting that this was wrong, that had not done anything bad, but no one listened to him either. As pulled her down the corridor, stayed silent. She did not struggle. She did not beg. She simply walked with her head held high, her jaw set, her eyes looking straight ahead. The commandant thought he had just arrested a troublemaker. He thought he had done his job. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He had dragged the wrong human girl. The detention cell was small and cold. The walls were made of smooth gray metal, and there was no window, only a single light panel in the ceiling that never turned off. A narrow bench ran along one wall, and that was the only furniture. Sat on it with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She had been here for 3 hours now. No one had come to talk to her. No one had asked for her side of the story. She was not afraid. She had done nothing wrong, and she knew that the truth would come out eventually. But as the hours stretched on, she began to wonder if anyone was even looking for it. In his office 2 levels above the detention block, Commandant was writing his report. His long gray fingers moved across the screen with practiced speed. He did not bother checking the security footage. He did not bother interviewing witnesses. He already knew what had happened, or at least, he knew what he wanted to have happened. A human had attacked 3 students without reason. They were victims. The human was a violent troublemaker who needed to be punished. Had never liked humans. He thought they were arrogant little creatures who did not understand their place in the galaxy. They had only been in space for a few years, and already they acted like they belonged here. It offended his sense of order. The galaxy had rules, hierarchies that had existed for thousands of years. Humans had no right to challenge them. His report recommended severe punishment, expulsion from the academy, deportation back to Earth, a formal complaint to the Galactic Council that could restrict human access to integration programs for decades. It would send a message. It would remind the humans that they were guests here, tolerated but not welcomed. He signed the report and sent it to the station administrator. Then he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Justice had been served. But had made a critical error. He had assumed that Price was just another human, unremarkable and unconnected. He could not have been more wrong. On Earth, in a large building that served as the headquarters for the United Earth Defense Initiative, a notification appeared on a screen. It was flagged as urgent. A woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes read it once, then read it again. Her name was Dr. Price, and she was the chief for the Defense Initiative. More importantly, she was mother. First call was to her husband. Commander Richard Price was aboard the Earth cruiser Endurance, currently stationed near the border of human space. When he heard what had happened to his daughter, his face went pale, then red with anger. He gave orders immediately. The Endurance would change course for Station 7. They would be there in 18 hours. Second call was to her father-in-law. General William Price had retired from active duty 5 years ago, but he was still one of the most respected figures in human military history. He had personally negotiated humanity's entry into the Galactic Alliance. He had sat across the table from alien leaders and convinced them that humans deserved a place in the galaxy. He was not a man who could be ignored. When the general heard what had happened, he did not shout. He did not curse. He simply nodded once and said he would handle it. Within the hour, he had called the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. The ambassador called the council itself. By the time the sun set on Earth, every major human official knew what was happening on Station 7. But the most important thing happened on the station itself, and it was done by Danny. Danny had watched get dragged away by the guards, and he had seen the look on Commandant's face. It was the look of someone who had already made up his mind. Danny knew that look. He had seen it before, on Earth and on the station. It was the look of someone who did not care about the truth. So Danny decided to find the truth himself. He went to the east corridor where the fight had happened. The security cameras there were part of the station's main network, and Danny was studying to be an engineer. He knew how the system worked. He found an access panel and connected his personal tablet. It took him 20 minutes to locate the right footage and download it. When he watched it, his hands began to shake. The video showed everything. It showed being cornered and hit. It showed stepping forward to defend her. It showed the fight, which lasted only a few seconds and ended with standing over three who had started the whole thing. And it showed arriving, ignoring the evidence, and arresting the wrong person. Danny made a copy of the video. Then he made another copy, and another. He sent it to every news outlet on the station. He sent it to human media networks back on Earth. He sent it to his friends, who sent it to their friends. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. The students of Station 7 began to talk. Many of them had seen the bully other students before. Many of them had been afraid to speak up. But now they had proof that the security forces were corrupt, that had arrested an innocent person because of her species. The anger that had been building for months finally had somewhere to go. By morning, there were protests outside the detention block. Students from a dozen different species stood together, demanding release. They held signs in languages could not read, but the message was clear. This is wrong. Justice must be served. Watched the crowd from his office window. For the first time, he felt something cold in his stomach. He had expected this to be simple. He had expected the humans to accept their place and stay quiet. But they were not staying quiet. They were fighting back. And worse was coming. A message arrived from the station administrator, counselor. A human warship was approaching the station. It was the Endurance, one of the most heavily armed vessels in the human fleet. It had changed course from its patrol route and was heading directly for 7. Its commander had requested a meeting with the counselor. Read the name of the commander and felt the cold in his stomach turn to ice. Richard Price, the arrested girl's father. The commandant had thought he was teaching a lesson to a helpless little human. He had not realized that he was poking a hornet's nest, and now the hornets were coming. He looked at the report he had filed, the one full of lies and assumptions. He looked at the video that was playing on every screen on the station. He looked at the crowd outside the detention block, growing larger by the minute. For the first time in his long career, Commandant understood that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was far too late to take it back. The Endurance was not a small ship. It was a cruiser, 200 meters long, built for patrol and combat. Its hull was painted in the dark gray colors of the United Earth Defense Fleet, and its name was written in white letters across the bow. It carried a crew of 400 men and women, along with enough weapons to level a small moon. When it emerged from faster-than-light travel and took position near Station 7, every sensor on the station detected it. Counselor stood in the command center, watching the human ship on the main screen. The counselor was a species known for their political skills and their ability to sense when a situation was about to become very bad. Right now, every instinct in his body was screaming that this situation was already a disaster. The human ship is requesting docking permission, one of his aides reported. Their commander wishes to meet with you personally. Nodded slowly. He had been in politics for 60 years. He knew when to fight and when to negotiate. This was not a time to fight. Grant them permission, he said, and prepare a conference room. Make it nice. 20 minutes later, Commander Richard Price walked into Station 7. He was not a large man by human standards, about average height with broad shoulders and short brown hair that was going gray at the temples. He wore the formal uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet, dark blue with gold trim and the insignia of a cruiser commander on his collar. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Those eyes belonged to a man who had seen combat, who had lost people he cared about, and who was not going to lose anyone else. Behind him walked two officers and a woman in civilian clothes. The woman was Dr. Price, who had arrived on a faster transport ship just hours before. She carried a data tablet in her hands, and her expression was even harder than her husband's. Counselor met them in the conference room. He was polite. He offered refreshments. He expressed his deep concern about the unfortunate misunderstanding that had occurred. He assured them that the station took all complaints seriously and that a full investigation would be conducted. Commander Price listened to all of this without speaking. When the counselor finished, the commander reached into his uniform pocket and took out a small device. He placed it on the table, and a holographic screen appeared in the air. The security footage began to play. Watched in silence, he saw the students corner the girl. He saw them hit her. He saw the human girl step forward to defend her friend. He saw the fight, which was over before it really began. And he saw Commandant arrive, ignore the evidence, and arrest the wrong person. When the footage ended, Commander Price spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. "My daughter defended an innocent student from assault," he said. "Your security officer fabricated a report to cover up his own negligence and prejudice. I am not here to threaten you, counselor. I am here to ensure that justice is served." Was a practical being. He had not become a station administrator by being stupid. He could see the shape of this disaster clearly now. The footage was everywhere. The protests were growing. A human warship was sitting outside his station. And somewhere in a prison cell, a young human girl was waiting for someone to tell the truth. He made his decision quickly. "I will personally oversee the investigation," he said. "If your daughter is innocent, she will be released immediately. And if any of my officers have acted improperly, they will face the full consequences of their actions." Price stepped forward and placed her data tablet on the table. "I have already begun reviewing the records," she said. "Commandant has a long history of discriminatory behavior toward humans and other species he considers inferior. There are 17 formal complaints in his file. All of them were ignored." His expression tightened. He had not known about those complaints, or perhaps he had known and had chosen not to see. Either way, it did not matter now. The truth was in the open, and there was no putting it back. The investigation took 3 days, was questioned under formal procedures. The students were interviewed separately. Witnesses were called forward, students who had seen the bullying and been too afraid to speak before. The evidence was overwhelming. And his two friends had been terrorizing smaller students for over a year. They had beaten a young boy so badly that he had to be sent home. They had stolen from other students. They had threatened anyone who tried to report them, and every time had looked the other way because they were powerful and the victims were not. On the 3rd day, Counselor made his announcement. Commandant was removed from his position and placed under arrest for falsifying official reports and abuse of authority. The 3 students were expelled from the academy and would face charges in their home system. All past complaints that had been ignored would be reopened and reviewed. And Price was innocent. Issued a formal apology to and her family. He read it in front of the entire station, his words broadcast on every screen. He admitted that the station had failed in its duty to protect all students equally. He promised reforms. He promised that this would never happen again. Was released from detention that afternoon. When she walked out of the security building, she found a crowd waiting for her. Was there, her eyes red from crying but her face bright with joy. Danny was there, grinning like an idiot. And behind them were dozens of other students, humans and aliens alike, who had come to see the girl who had stood up when no one else would. Commander Price stood apart from the crowd, watching his daughter. When she saw him, she walked over and hugged him without saying a word. He held her tight for a long moment. "I knew you could handle it," he said quietly, "but I was not going to let you handle it alone." Pulled back and looked at him. There was something new in her eyes, something that had not been there before. She had been tested and she had not broken. She had faced injustice and had not backed down. She was no longer just a quiet student keeping her head down. She was something more now, and the whole station knew it. Dr. Price stepped forward and put her hand on shoulder. "Your grandfather sends his love," she said. "He also says he is proud of you." smiled for the first time in days. Then she turned and looked at the crowd that had gathered to welcome her back. She did not know what to say to them. She was not good with words. She never had been. But she did not have to say anything. Sometimes, action spoke louder than any speech ever could. She had acted, and the galaxy had noticed. 1 week had passed since release. The station had changed in ways that were hard to measure. The security officers walked differently now, more carefully, more aware that they were being watched. The students who remained kept to themselves, their arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like shame. And the other students, the ones who had always kept their heads down and hoped not to be noticed, walked a little taller. Counselor had asked to speak at the weekly student assembly. It was not a command, it was a request. He said the students needed to hear from her, needed to understand what had happened and why it mattered, had wanted to say no. She was not a public speaker. She did not like attention, but had looked at her with those big dark eyes. And Danny had said that people needed hope. And her grandfather had told her over a video call that sometimes the hardest thing to do was the thing that needed to be done. So she said yes. The main assembly hall was the largest room on the station. It could hold 10,000 people, and today it was nearly full. Students from every species sat in curved rows that rose up toward the distant ceiling. The light panels overhead cast a warm glow over the crowd, making the room feel almost welcoming. At the front of the hall was a simple podium made of dark metal, and behind it hung the flags of every species represented at the academy. The human flag was small, tucked away in a corner where few people would notice it. Stood backstage, waiting for her name to be called. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were sweating. She had faced 3 warriors without fear, but standing in front of thousands of people made her want to run away and hide. Stood beside her, holding her hand. "You will be fine," the girl said softly. "Just speak from your heart." Danny was on her other side, bouncing on his feet with nervous energy. "Do not forget to breathe," he said. "I read that somewhere. Breathing is important." Almost laughed, almost. Then the announcer called her name, and there was no more time for nervousness. She walked out onto the stage, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The crowd was watching her. 8,000 pairs of eyes, some curious, some skeptical, some hopeful. She reached the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. For a moment she could not speak. The words she had prepared vanished from her mind. She stood there, small and alone, a human girl facing a galaxy that had never believed her species mattered. Then she thought of her grandfather. She thought of his voice, steady and calm, teaching her how to stand firm when everything seemed against her. She thought of crying on the floor while 3 bullies laughed at her. She thought of all the students who had been afraid to speak, afraid to act, afraid to be noticed. She took a breath and she began. "When I came to this station, I did not expect to make trouble. I did not expect to fight anyone. I just wanted to learn. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to represent my planet well. But sometimes things happen that you do not plan for. Sometimes you see something that you cannot ignore." She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. "I saw my friend being hurt. I saw 3 students who were bigger and stronger using that strength to cause pain. I saw them laughing at someone who could not fight back, and I made a choice. I chose to step forward. I chose to stand between the victim and the attackers. I chose to act." The hall was silent. No one moved, no one whispered. "I know that many of you think humans are weak. We are small. We do not have claws or scales or armor. We have only been part of this galaxy for a few years. But there is something you should understand about us." She looked out at the crowd, meeting the eyes of students she did not know, beings from species she had never seen before. "Humans do not give up. When the path is hard, we keep walking. When the night is dark, we keep looking for the light. When someone tells us we cannot do something, we find a way to do it anyway. That is how we survived on our planet. That is how we reached the stars. And that is how we will earn our place in this galaxy." She could feel something changing in the room. The skepticism was fading. The curiosity was growing. People were leaning forward in their seats. "I am not a hero. I'm just a girl who could not look away when someone needed help. But if my actions have shown you anything, I hope it is this. Anyone can stand up. Anyone can choose to protect the weak instead of ignoring them. Anyone can be brave when it matters most." She looked toward the corner of the stage where and Danny were standing. Her friends, her family on this station. "The galaxy is full of beings who are bigger than us, stronger than us, older than us. But size does not make you powerful. Strength does not make you good. What makes you powerful is choosing to use what you have for something that matters. What makes you good is standing up for others even when you are afraid. She straightened her shoulders and raised her voice. I am human. We are small. We are new, but we are not weak. And those who hurt the vulnerable will always find that there is a human willing to stand in their way, not because we are the strongest, but because standing up is what we do. She stopped speaking. The hall was completely silent. Then someone began to clap. It was, standing at the edge of the stage, her thin hands coming together again and again. Danny joined her. Then another student. Then another. The applause spread through the crowd like a wave, growing louder and louder until the entire hall was thundering with it. Stood at the podium, not sure what to do. She had never been applauded before. She did not know how to respond. So she did the only thing that felt right. She gave a small nod, stepped back from the podium, and walked off the stage. Backstage, threw her arms around her. Danny was laughing and wiping tears from his eyes. Even Counselor approached her, his expression respectful in a way it had not been before. You have given them something to think about, the counselor said. Something to remember. Shook her head. I just told them the truth. Sometimes the truth is exactly what people need to hear. That night sat in her small dormitory room and looked out the window at the stars. The Endurance was still visible in the distance, a small point of light among millions. Her father was on that ship, watching over her even though she did not need watching anymore. Her mother had returned to Earth, but she had promised to call every week. And her grandfather had sent a message that simply said 2 words, well done. The station was quiet now. The protests had ended. The cameras had stopped recording. Life was returning to normal, whatever normal meant on a space station full of aliens. But something had changed, something that could not be undone. The galaxy had learned a lesson about humanity. They had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. They had learned that even the smallest, quietest person could have strength that you could not see. And they had learned that dragging the wrong human girl was a mistake they would not forget. Closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow there would be classes. There would be homework and exams and all the ordinary challenges of student life. But for tonight, she let herself rest. She had done what needed to be done. She had spoken her truth, and the galaxy had listened. That was enough.